Hi again, everybody. Sorry, it's me again. I'm presenting this on behalf of what I would call the Agroecology Initiative team, which is a number of colleagues from research and also our partners wherever we are working in different countries. I'm going to share some experiences. I'm not sure it's the best experiences. It's just a way of illustrating how we try to work. So, am I in full screen? No, huh? No.
Not yet. Now, yes.
So, very quickly, for those of you who might not know what the Agroecology Initiative in a nutshell, so it's objective, develop and scale agroecological innovation with small-scale farmers and something important, other agricultural and food system actors across different socio-ecological contexts. We work in 8 or even more highly diverse contexts in Tunisia, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Kenya, Zimbabwe, India, both in Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, Laos, Peru. It's the research team are mostly CG centers, the Alliance, IMI, World Fish, CIFOR-ICRAF, I'm sure I'm going to forget many people. CIRAD, and obviously our national and local partners who might or might not be researchers. Actually, a number, I think the majority of them are not researchers. And it started to be implementing not even 2.5 years ago, and it's going to finish in this first phase by the end of the year. So I don't want you to necessarily understand the diagram on the right, but it's basically there is a living landscape, which is a way, some people call them living labs. It's a space for multi-stakeholder collaboration. You could maybe call it transdisciplinary collaboration around agroecological transition. And around this core device for collaboration, there is transdisciplinary on the front side, transdisciplinary co-creation of innovation to test and assess the benefits of agroecology. There is business models with a focus on agroecological business models, the idea of institutional arrangements, especially policy and policy instruments, the idea of assessment and holistic assessment, and the idea of influencing understanding, mostly it's the first phase, but influencing behavioral change. There is also a small component about gender and youth and social inclusion. So you can see it's a fairly, if I may abuse the word, it's a fairly transdisciplinary approach to agroecological transition. How we try to do research differently in this initiative. So I think one of the first things is these partnerships that we possibly use it in this agroecological living landscape. Landscape being not necessarily well defined, depending on where we work. It can be related to a value chain, it can be related to a watershed, it can be related to a small region, it can be also related to a territory where farmer organizations operate. So it's not necessarily continuous. And when we say it is our main focus of work, it doesn't mean that we work exclusively at this living landscape. There is obviously plots, there is farms, there is national level, there are all kinds of scales that we address in interaction with this living landscape. Another thing we try to do is to start not by saying we have to do a transition, we try to formulate a collective, a shared vision about what is a desirable future for the stakeholder of the landscape that we work, a desirable future, and what is the place of agroecology in this desirable future, because as you know, many stakeholders have interest and objectives and desire that go way beyond agroecology. We then, once we have this vision formulated, which requires some specific tools, we try to go into identifying transition pathways. So how do we get to this desirable future? We try to identify behavior changes that may be needed to get to this future, and we try to develop work plans where we can work together. We develop what we call a vision to action kind of process. Another thing we try to do is co-designing, and mostly we work on co-designing technical innovation, but it can apply also to business models or to policy, with a component about identifying existing local innovation. I'm not sure, Lisa, if you're going to talk about it, but it seems that Prolinova has obviously worked a lot on agreeing on priority issue in technology between farmers organization, technicians, and researchers from the research team. Co-designing protocols, designing and monitoring, evaluation, and learning system around these trials, And the last one we try to do is holistic assessment of the performance of agroecology with at the same time a generic framework, but also trying to have a locally adapted framework to take into account the diversity of context. So I think this is how we try to do research differently. I'm not going to enter into the details of how we try to sequence this process, starting from mapping of stakeholder, engaging with stakeholders, developing vision, co-designing innovation. And right now we are in this early assessment, early because 3 years or 2.5 is very short term for a process of transition that might last more than a decade. So we know we are into a beginning of a process. Just a few images you can see from Andhra Pradesh, you can see from Kenya on the right, from Tunisia, from Senegal on the bottom right. So it means there are field activities, there are training, there are workshops, there are all kinds of different ways we can make this transdisciplinary, this action research, this collaboration work in different settings. And obviously the settings will depend on the specific activities and also which stakeholders participate, because not all stakeholders are necessarily in every setting or every activity. Just an example of work they did in Kenya that Lisa again was coordinating, just to show that when we say we work on testing innovations or innovative practices, when you look at what people are already doing that can be related to agroecology, in a broad sense, you have already a lot of things happening. So it's not necessary that we enter a new ground for many farmers or farming systems. It's something that I think most of us we know it is the case. Just to tell you, and this is an idea of how many different things we did in different countries with different types of on-farm experiment, different types of protocols, and this training or capacity building that was a key component of everything we do in co-design mode. And we put here training of farmers, but others as well, which is technicians and the researchers themselves. And here I'm not going to enter into detail the type of technologies we have been working on, which covered quite a lot of diversity, including things that are not directly crops, like crop livestock, water terraces, wetland management, solar pumping, depending obviously on the specific context and the negotiation that took place between the farmers, the community authorities or the community stakeholders, sometimes the private sector, about what makes sense, which is what is the demand, that we can work together to try to find enough new knowledge or enough new innovation that will help answer the challenge or the desire of the people that are involved in this collaboration. Few reflections to I would say to finalize it, even though I have barely started presenting. The idea that agroecology or contributing to agroecology transition require deploying and inventing systemic approaches that favor dialogue and co-design at various scales. I put in red because I think really it's something that is very important. I think, Michael, you already said we need innovative methods. I think we have found this. Context specificity and adaptation key to success. It's not that we're looking for the tool that will work everywhere or for the solution that will work everywhere. It's really important, not only the context, but the trajectory within the context, which is people have gone already through different things. For example, it's interesting now in many places to see that people look at agroecology saying going back to our roots, whereas for other contexts, it's really actually something that is not necessarily part of their culture, or at least it's a culture that is not present anymore. The idea that are we process-based or are we output-based in our research? I think that is something that is very important, and we could discuss about it. The willingness, Michael, you called it interest. I think this is something we have seen, and I think it is very important in the Agroecology Initiative. We are a group of people. CG people, as you know, are not necessarily the most known for their interest in action research, transdisciplinarity, but there is a team that is quite willing. The idea beyond the researchers, the individual, the emergence or the consolidation of a new culture for researcher and organization. So the word culture, Francisco, you use it, but it can also be applied to organization, to our own community of researchers. The idea that there is a huge need, a huge dimension about individual, but also collective learning, sharing. I added the word education because I think it's not just capacity building education that can start early on and can take different forms depending on the type of participant. The idea of negotiation and adaptation constantly going on. The goals, the objective, the object, the pace, the sharing of funding, which is something researchers don't like to discuss. They like to be controlled. The credits that are given, not only through authorship, the values, the attitudes, who takes part in this negotiation, what kind of power dynamics, because we talk about transdisciplinarity, but not all disciplines or not all stakeholders have the same, I would say, power to influence or to contribute to whatever is being done collectively. And last, the idea of developing and actually using an adaptive MER, which is monitoring, evaluation, and learning approach and process to be able to periodically assess and assess critically, not just claim success, but assess critically what we do and adjust the way we work together and we achieve change. Oh, sorry. That's something I had already said about the credits, but I put it again, the shared ownership of knowledge, of results, of success, of the process. And I think researchers, we have not been necessarily very good at letting enough space for others or letting others claim credit first and us coming as backstoppers. I think I'm done. So you have the website of the initiative if you want to see more, and obviously you can write to me if you want to enter into some kind of dialogue. Thank you very much for your patience with this presentation.
Thank you very much, Bernard. So let me now pass the floor to Marie Delotte-Biasquet. She's a researcher at CIRAD, and she will be presenting for the Foresight program. Marie, do you wish to present yourself? Share your slides? Yeah, okay, the floor is yours.
Can you see my slides now?
Yes, very well, thanks.
Hello, yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I will present a project that is being done by CIRAD and FAO and funded by GIZ, which is on the foresight for the transformation of agri-food system through agroecology. And it had two components, a global stock-taking component on what do the foresight exercises that have been done in the past, what can we learn from them? And then there were two participatory foresight exercises, one in India and one in Senegal. Basically, the background is the following. The question is, can policymakers make real transformative decisions if they are presented the usual options? And our answer is no. Policymakers cannot make transformative decisions if they are always presented the same options. And what do we see for the moment about what is the way it is thinking about the future? It is mostly modeling that is shown, and the models kind of it depends on what you put in and what then you influences very highly what you come out, and therefore there should be really more different types of doing it. Foresight is really is different from pure modeling. Foresight is really to anticipate and invent several futures. It is not only anticipating one future, it is anticipating and inventing, really creating the future you want. Bernard talked about desirable future. That's what Foresight does, but I would say desirable futures with an S, because there are several ones. And it is also assessing how they will be in the long term, not in the next 5 years, but in the next 20 years. So Foresight is really interdisciplinary by nature. It requires people from different disciplines. So it requires researchers from different disciplines, but also working with farmers, working with policymakers, working with people from the agro industry. So it also goes beyond pure research. It goes also to the whole participants of the agri-food system. It is collaborative and participatory, and I will show you how we've done it. It has a problem-solving orientation. It is trying to innovate, and it looks at impact and application. And I will really explain a bit more how we did it in the two components, the global review and the Andhra Pradesh in India and Senegal. First of all, what have been the process of our project. So for the global guidance process, we were asked to look at a corpus of foresight exercises, and we found 16 of them who had agroecology scenarios in them, and we analyzed them in a very thorough and rigorous way. In order to try to, we debate the results, we have a lot of workshops and presentation of the results, and got to the final document. And we tried to bring together agroecology and foresight community. And the objective was to get to a global guidance process on how to do foresight for the transformation of the food system through agroecology. So now we have finished this global guidance document on how to do foresight in the future. And I will show you a few lessons that we've drawn from that. Then the second component was done of the project is work being done in Andhra Pradesh and Senegal, where a model was designed and really built with the farmers, and in order to see how agroecological agriculture, what it would be 25 years from now. So the models were used not to say it will be like this, but they were used as what we call learning machines. That means it is all the participants in the foresight processes, the farmers, the policymakers, people from the agro industries, they build together the scenarios by having with a lot of debate, and then there was modeling work to test the plausibility and consistency of the desired future. So it was really a learning machine. It was not to say it will be like this, but it will probably be like this if you take these hypotheses, and by testing the hypothesis, people really learned a lot. So stakeholders were really intellectually and emotionally involved. And what did we learn also from the global foresight? So we had we looked at the 16 foresight exercises that have agroecology in it, which is not a lot when you look at all the foresight exercises that are taking place. A lot of them do not have scenarios with agroecology. And even there, we were a bit wide because we didn't stay strictly with agroecology, but we took sustainable intensification. I mean, our definition was rather wide. What we learned is that there was not that many of them, and there should be many. Most of the foresight processes are done from the north, with institutions from the north. And really, we believe and recommend that more institutions from the south should be involved in foresight with agroecology. That a lot of the foresight on the future of agriculture look with agroecology. They pay too much attention to, when they look at food security, they put a lot of attention to availability and not necessarily to stability or access. It really looks at availability. There's not enough attention to the whole agri-food system. What we looked at, they consider very often production. So that would be level 1, 2, and 3 of Gleason's definitions of agroecology. And they don't look at all at the whole processing, retaining, consuming, storing, disposing part of the system. No, so they don't look at the whole agri-food system. And they often also forget about what happens to farmers, employment, emissions, pathogen, water use. And some of them do take that into account, but not enough. Also, there's not enough attention to scale, to interactions between territorial scale, national scale, regional and global scales. They look at innovation. Sometimes they consider innovation will be very rapid, but also there are inertia, and these inertia are not always taken into account. And what we also found, that there's a need for more articulation between qualitative and quantitative methods about looking at the futures. So really important recommendations that all for Foresight, that all 5 levels of agroecology should be included. And really, it's the whole agri-food system that must be looked upon, taking into account storing, processing, retailing, etc. And that you can have also, and people often forget that you can have several scenarios with agroecology, and that it is important to have powerful and imaginative representation of the future, and really narratives that really appeal to people, because people live with stories and not only with figures. And if you want people to go to a transition to agroecology, you really have to bring stories that will appeal to them. Figures are not sufficient. From the work that was done at the global, but also at the national level, at least in India and in Senegal, we saw that when you go through look at the future with an agro-industrial lens, which is most of the business as usual models, what goes into is about enlarging farm sizes, and because it will drive profit into industrial agriculture. With an agroecological lens and another model, which in that case was agribiome, you see that enlarging farm size cannot be a driver in most developing countries because of population growth, land constraints, etc. You also see that with an agro-industrial lens, you tend to go towards a world without agricultural or farmers, with an agroecology lens and another model, but the model have to adapt. You cannot use the classical model to think about the future of agroecology. You need special models that take different types of, more types of crops, interaction between crops and livestock, and use of water, and the classical models do not do that. And also, it shows that there are, with the agroecology lengths, there are these highly diversified systems, as you know. So developing new models show that there's a need for new metrics, and that's very important for the people working in agroecology. We cannot develop foresight or models with the current metrics. We need new metrics, and therefore we need new and more and better quality data that are really needed for these models. And there's also a need for really ethics of participation and deliberation, because when you have big groups of farmers, policymakers, everybody has to listen to each other and really support and react to other people, and some people cannot take the power over other ones. So last, I would say that really this project, there's a big integration of disciplines. There's a big level of collaboration in the project also at national level, at global level. And what we see in the project that have been studied, that it is a lot of collaboration in some projects. They basically have a problem-solving orientation. Innovation is very good. And as far as impact and application, it shows that the future with conventional industrial system is not desirable, but it also showed that the future with agroecology is desirable, but not without tensions, not without difficulties. All problems will not be solved through agroecology. And it is important to show that the work we've done shows that, and it is important to keep that in mind and not to try to sell a future that is really lovely and without difficulties. Thank you very much, and I'm at your disposal afterwards for any questions.
Thank you very much, Marie. So this was a very interesting presentation. I'm now going to pass the floor to Valentina Robiglio, Senior Land Use System Scientist at CIFOR-ICRAF, who will be talking to us about AGROFOR. Valentina, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the framework that actually came very timely, because it's helping us on an ex post assessment of what we have done in the project AGROFOR, and I found it very, very, very relevant what I'm going to present are like the first emerging insights from the use of this framework that is similar to things we were already thinking at. So AGROFOR is a project that focuses on what we call a wicked problem, that is the problem of tropical deforestation, smallholder and commodity-driven tropical deforestation at forest frontiers, in this case in Peru. And for being deforestation a very complex, an outcome of a series of interconnected dynamics, social, ecological, economical, what we need are really interdisciplinary approaches. And so AGROFOR is a project that, together with a sister project called PARA, has been active between 2019 and 2023, and focus on agroforestry concession. Agroforestry concession is a legal mechanism that was developed by the Ministry of Agriculture and the Forest Service in Peru, that basically grants a land title for 30 years to formalize the access to land and trees of farmers who have settled on forest land, so that who are not eligible for a proper title. We had estimated that there are 120,000 beneficiary households who manage about 1.5 million hectares of forest landscape mosaic, so it's quite relevant for Peru. And the two projects together focused on enabling socio-technical and institutional conditions for agroforestry concession to be attractive for farmers and successful in engaging them, engaging communities, but also in engaging authorities to achieve land restoration, deforestation, and social inclusion outcomes. So how did the project work? There were basically three components. The first component is where most of the research took place, and where three regional landscape pilots that were different watersheds in three Amazonian region to cover the heterogeneity of farmers, of livelihoods, and also of authority capacities of land use system. And in these three pilots, we set up a system of integrated research that looked at practices and land use system, including the agricultural and the silvicultural component, looked at household capacities, capabilities, aspirations, and also looked at how tenure and regulation and rights influence decision. And the research conducted at this level informed the two other components, but this process all this process were in parallel. So research was concomitant to engagement with institutions, and also with the activities that relate to the sustainability component. So, so focusing on research, so the key outputs of research were a menu of agroforestry option and agroforestry practices that include practices related to different land use system, and also at the farm and at the landscape level. And then local models of delivery, the technical, delivering these approaches to the implementation of practices. And so looking at models of rural advisory services and ways to generate and co-generate knowledge with farmers. We also focused on developing agroforestry knowledge platforms and communities of practices. And now we are the reflection is leading us to think of a new framework to look at this system at the forest farm interface that basically centers on agroecology as a leverage for forest stewardship, really through an integrated way to look at land use system in this type of landscape. So in terms of the technical institutional component, what we did was really informing what we were doing in the pilot and really connecting institution, connecting authorities to the processes on the ground to improve regulation, generate public funding guidelines, generate farm registries that fit with the data management system of the local authorities, that fits with their monitoring and zoning. And also we inform all the policies that related to climate change and that focus on smallholder land use system. And for the sustainability component, we engaged through the consortium with actors that focus on green public incentives, on rural advisory services, on value chain and zero deforestation. And that came basically by the design of the project. So in terms of actors and disciplinary integration, we had a course research and expert team with different disciplines, land use system, PS economy, livelihoods economists, rural specialists on rural advisory system, and all the different, let's say, discipline that really focus and land on the local community and let us understand local context and local system. Then there were a group of technical experts, basically lawyers, foresters, policy and public finance experts, topographers, and communication specialists, local experts, advisors to regional government, technical assistant and extensionists, forester and lawyer, gender specialists, who were part of the team as the technical expert, but not of the research team in the sense of research. And then we had the actors we engage with that we call strategic case actors and stakeholders that are functionaries of the national forest authorities, of the different units of the forest authorities, and also of authorities of the regional level and of the different ministry, including the Ministry of Environment. And the local case actors who are farmers, communities, the local functionaries, local foresters, and members of technical agricultural roundtables, NGOs, organizations, and civil societies. And in the sequencing of the work, so the project was really developed based on a preliminary study on smallholder and inclusion and opportunities for that. That was realized in 2015. So based on that, we, who are the core scientist group, engaged both with the expert and with the policymakers and with the communities to analyze the problem. And then we, when we designed the research, we worked with the expert and we consulted the communities and the policies and the government authorities. And then in the research implementation phase, as you can see, there were many more connections with the research core team, co-producing knowledge with the farmers and with the local experts, and consulting the policy, the authorities, and with connection that also were independent from us, that started to be built because of the process. So in terms of the preliminary reflection and validation of results that we had at the end of the project last year, again, it was us who basically connected through the different actors and to the different actors and facilitated the process of reflection. Whereas now that we are in the institutionalization phase, so the project is ended and we become marginal, there are the other actors who are connected and develop the knowledge and the processes to give sustainability and institutionalize project results. So in terms of the conclusion, how to embed research into action, because I think this is really what the project tried to do. It is very important to do this concept of starting with a problem-solving orientation, because that can really connect and engage the different stakeholders to generate impact and innovation. It's important with this focus to work on a multi-level and nested structure. That is really what allowed us to capture the interplay within components at the same level, but also across levels, not only the governance one, but also, of course, the governance part is key. It's important to develop a project structure that allows for continuous co-learning through effective communication interaction. So the most interesting, I think the key steps and the key phases in our project when we managed to go to the field together with authorities of different sectors. There were the farmers, the communities, the NGOs, and also this transdisciplinary team that we had in the field with specialists of rights, agronomists, foresters, engagement people, technicians, and extensionists. So there is really the need to invest and engage on knowledge, and that's a big lesson learned. You need resources to develop all these components that basically are the matrix of this type of projects. It's important to, and I think this is a challenge, really to manage to fully integrate knowledge system and value system, and also to frame and manage trade-offs, because trade-offs emerge at the horizontal level and across the different components of the system, and it's very difficult to navigate them. It's super key, the behavior, the attitude of the researchers and of the team for continuous negotiation of concepts across teams, so within the research unit and with stakeholders. And that's really related to the personal and to the organizational culture. And it can be super frustrating because it takes a lot of time and it's a lot of back and forth, and it's not linear as a process. So that requires capacity for adaptive management and flexibility, and also requires a kind of implementation theory. And that's very important. How do we sequence things, and how are we able to really implement things in an adaptive way, but at the same time respecting the sequencing? Very simple things. Planting season. If you because of the research that takes more time, you are not able to take results, and you are not able to test your innovation because you miss the planting season, and it's very difficult to really manage all these things together. And we need adequate impact assessment frameworks and metrics, qualitative, quantitative, across levels and on these different components. And we need time, because it's time for the research, but also for system level change. There is this inertia that also other colleagues mentioned, and this non-linearity of these processes that probably needs that we find ways to embed research into programs rather than into projects. And I think that's my last slide.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Very interesting presentation. And now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Lisa Fuchs, who was, ciao Valentina, now I see you, was the former Agroecology TPP coordinator and now has moved on to greater things. The floor is yours. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I am very happy to speak after this incredible lineup, I think. It's been really interesting. So I was invited to speak about experiences from ABCD. And specifically, I will look at how structured co-design engagement processes allow mobilizing assets and agency for efficient, equitable, and sustainable outcomes. I hope that my slides are moving. I'm in a place where internet is not great. I think I will cut my camera. And now nothing is moving.
Do you want me to pull up your slides?
Let me try. Okay, I think it's coming now that I
Yeah,
cut the camera.
it's coming. Yeah, it's coming. Yeah,
Okay, so I'll be speaking about asset-based community-driven development, or ABCD. As most of you might not know, ABCD actually has been around for quite a while and was initially conceptualized by two professors in the US, Jody Kretzmann and John McKnight, who worked together in the 1980s together with a number of associates on understanding how to improve inner city dynamics in the US. In 1993, they published a seminal book that is called Building Communities from the Inside Out. Since they began speaking about ABCD and developing methods and approaches, the global network of people who are participating on engaging in ABCD has really grown. And today we're finding ourselves with a huge community of practice that includes various different stakeholders, including an ABCD Institute that is based in Chicago and the Coady Institute that is based in Eastern Canada, for example. ABCD does a lot of different things, but fundamentally it introduces a change in perspective. You can have a look at the graph on the right-hand side, and I'll be sharing the slides as well as everybody else so we can have a better look at them. But fundamentally, ABCD really looks at moving from external assessments to appreciative self-realization, from deliverables to discoverables, that is a specific term that we use, and fundamentally from top-down service driven modalities to locally driven community-wide social political solutions. At ICRAF, I have been leading an ABCD team. So as Fabio just said, I used to be at ICRAF. I was at ICRAF for 10 years. I recently moved to the Alliance, but at ICRAF, I was implementing several ABCD projects. And in these different projects, we did a lot of different things. So as I said, I was invited to speak about ABCD. But I'll just mention a few things so that you can have a look, but you see the kinds of things that we were doing. And I included numerous references at the end of the slides. And as I said, I'll be sharing my slides. So in this research and development approach that we've been implementing over 10 years at ICRAF, sorry, the scientific lens, if you will, that we applied has really been different according to what we had been working on. So initially, we really looked at what ABCD is and how it can be done in the context of what we are working in, so international agricultural research and development setting. We developed both highly structured and integrated approaches, such as what you're seeing here on the screen, but we also developed much more distilled versions of how ABCD can be operationalized in our context. We also looked a lot at what it does in terms of the effects on livelihoods, on climate change adaptation, mitigation, etc. And more recently, we looked at various different things that you can have a look at. And we more recently also started looking at the specificities of how it operates, what the implications are in terms of doing science differently. So to really understand what the intrinsic contributions are when taking these very decisive and explicit engagement approaches, how it influences attitudinal changes, and how it can potentially contribute to behavioral changes. So as I said, I recently moved to the Alliance, and now we mobilize this knowledge in the context of several bilateral projects, one of which is the VIPPT project, the Vegetable Integrated Push-Pull project, that is led by ICIPE. And you can find out more about this project and others on the TPP website on GLFX. We also mobilize some of this ABCD work in the context of the Agroecology Initiative. So as I said, I was invited to speak about ABCD, but as I was preparing, I thought about the fact that I would like to spend more time on the more reflexive part of this conversation. So the question of what is transdisciplinarity? And we discussed how transdisciplinarity, of course, is related to co-design, to co-creation. And it's an interesting position to present last, but I think it also helps to contextualize. So often when we think about co-design, we think about co-design in the context of on-farm innovation, on-farm experimentation, and farm-led experimentation. Vienna briefly spoke about a specific approach that we took in the Agroecology Initiative in Kenya, where we had a highly structured approach to even the initial analysis, but then also in terms of how we co-designed a cycle with the participating farmers. So this is what we typically use to, and many of us are familiar with that. But is this really the only place where co-design happens? And of course we know it isn't, but very often we don't speak about this enough. We don't necessarily look enough at the other stages of a project lifecycle and beyond that, that are relevant and that we could be thinking about.
Hello?
Sorry, if you can mute your microphone. Okay, I'll mute.
Okay. So some of these places, and some of the presenters actually spoke about these different steps. So some of these places where co-design happens as well is, or can happen as well, should happen as well, is in the initial project design, project proposal design, the identification of participants, project and activity design, implementation, evaluation, and research. And some of the relevant questions we can ask ourselves in that context, and of course, these are absolutely not comprehensive, but I just placed them to guide our reflection a little bit, is in terms of the participants, who are we looking at? Are we looking at randomized recruitments of beneficiaries, what very often is the approach, or are we looking at passive selection of partners? In terms of the project and activities design, do we base ourselves on needs assessments, or do we perhaps look at individual and collective self-realization in line with existing assets and agency? Or in terms of implementation, are we prescriptive or responsive? Are we project-led or partner-led? And in terms of evaluation and research, are we conducting assessments or are we looking at learning? Do we validate or do we appreciate? So those are just a few of the questions that I wanted to raise. So drawing this more closely to this conceptual discussion that we started with, and that is the underlying fil rouge in the conversation, is really this, like the contribution that perhaps I can make building on these 10 years of ABCD to the proposed transdisciplinary research framework. And the thing that I have been speaking about for a few years now, but I think is still very relevant in our context, is that in research and development context, co-creation and co-design, transdisciplinarity have at least two sides. One of them really is this outcome focus, these outcome-focused processes. So what do we do and how do we structure activities to convey ownership and agency to achieve desired outcomes? So some of you know that I'm a political scientist at the basis, and political science often looks at agency and structure. So in this specific element, co-design and co-creation focus on the agency element of what people can change, what they can do, so that outcomes are achieved more easily or better. But the second aspect is really this structural focus, and that is the self-reflexive attitude. This is how to be a partner, how to be an ally by adopting relevant attitudes and practices as an external actor. So to me, as I said, this is like the structural focus, looking at our own selves, if you will, most of us in the setting which we're operating, critical self-awareness and reflexivity, and very often this is under-discussed, but I believe very important. This is actually my last slide, so contextualization. We started with HLPE and Fergus's work and team, of course, on what transdisciplinarity includes, and we have these 4 elements of being problem-focused, solution-oriented, inclusive, and reflexive. Then Michael and team expanded that and operationalized it by also adding some indicators and have integration of disciplines, collaboration, problem-solving orientation, innovation, impact, and application. And so as I was thinking about this, I thought it would be so nice to try and attempt to have some overlaps and a graphical representation for how these things interact, but then unfortunately I did not manage to make the time. And I thought about how my own reflections interact with that based on the experience with ABCD, but also beyond. And I recently wrote up something, and I know it's a bit long, but I wanted to contribute that just to the reflection about ethical co-design and engagement. And I'm in the process of submitting that somewhere for publication. So I can soon share this more comprehensively. But I really looked at a few things that are relevant. Number 1, passive partner selection across all scales. Number 2, it is important to embed all action in strong and continuous engagement frameworks that fosters responsive external action alongside community-driven action. To me, this is one of the core fundamental elements and one of the core learnings from ABCD. We are an important actor. We have an important contribution to make. Our contribution needs to be made in a responsive manner so that it is aligned with the interests of stakeholders with whom we are working, so that we can be an ally, we can be a partner, we can mobilize what we have access to, we can mobilize our capacities and assets in support of joint action. But we should never forget that we are not the only actors in the field. Whenever we're engaging with other partners, they do their own things. What we can do is we can help structure, we can help them structure how to be demand-driven in terms of the specific engagements that they have with various external partners, including us. The next element to me is really this question of the framing, and someone spoke about this as well. It is really important that the framing we adopt is responsive to partners' interests. If the partners with whom we are working are interested in specific matters, it's important that we understand and that we are able to speak to how what we're proposing aligns with, supports, and fosters the transformation that they're looking at achieving, rather than sticking to our universal concepts that sometimes we use and that are often way too abstract. Now, the next point that is very dear to me that I often speak about as well is this importance of activating the partners. Very often, many participatory approaches that exist fundamentally remain extractive because fundamentally, they still only use people as information givers. They don't necessarily reflect with them about which place they can hold and which role they can play, if you will. And I think that this is fundamentally important, that to have a modality of engagement that allows to activate partners to self-assess, self-actualize, and self-mobilize. Because this initial attitude towards one, and Michael spoke about this in terms of what he called interest, this initial attitudinal change about people's belief in their own ability to make a positive contribution, and their belief that they, with whatever little they might have, or with however much they have, they're in a position to already affect positive changes for themselves. My next point, Bernard spoke about this quite a bit, is the importance of inbuilt, continuous, and participatory self-evaluation and adaptive management cycles. So engagement cannot be a once-off. It is not we're coming in once and we have a nice engagement framework and then it stops there and then we go home with our data. It needs to continue, and there needs to be this self-evaluation element. In line with the self-evaluation comes this co-design of the safe evaluation and other metrics. Many of us spoke about the importance of ensuring and supporting people that they get out of this engagement process with us when they're interested in learning from it. In relation to that, also super important to give back the data. We often struggle with that, but not only giving back the data in general through a nice journal publication, but in a manner that responds to and is accessible, if you will, is accessible to different stakeholders at different levels. One additional very important element to me is this regular training and capacity building of the implementing teams, especially in research and development ethics. We spoke about respect. I think like one of my observations certainly is that research ethics often are not streamlined enough, perhaps. But if we want to contribute and if we want to have a role in transformation, we need to be clear on how to do that in an ethical manner. And then my last point is really taking responsibility for how structure influences contents and outcomes. So it's our responsibility to ensure that we show up, that our science is good, that our evidence is flawless, that we know how to operate and engage with other partners. So this is actually my last slide. Let me try and switch on my camera as well. But just one thing that I was thinking about as I was listening is, I feel the TPP might be in a unique place to foster a dialogue between all of us. We are many now who have sufficient insights and have a lot of experience, a lot of practical insights also into things that are important. And I think the TPP has been doing very well to foster this dialogue today. And I think it should not stop there. And we should really find ways of how we can mobilize our different pieces of insights into this question. And those of you who know me well know that I always speak about this importance of process and sequence and decision-making modalities in collaboration. So I look forward to hopefully achieving that. And I want to leave you here with this quote that I often use. Most projects fail because you do not get the people right. If you address what is not felt, you will not succeed. Nicholas is one of our partners in the Agroecology Initiative, and it has been a pleasure to work with him and others. Thank you. As I said, I included a lot of additional material in my slides, so please feel free to have a look at the slides and get in touch in case you're interested. Thank you.